Good day, global family. Today, I am endeavoring to give a post pandemic review. We had a pandemic in 2020 called the COVID 19 pandemic based around the COVID 19 virus. And so I want to take a look back at what happened. As you know, during 2020, I actually did a several videos detailing what was happening with the virus and giving some basic information and allowing persons to make their own personal decisions. And so, what I want to do now is, since the pandemic has ended, we want to take a look back at what happened, what lessons we may have learned, and what we can gather going forward to help us through the process. So, let's begin at the early stages. 2020, there was a crisis. There was something called the COVID 19 virus, COVID, and it really had an impact. A lot of people died. As I traveled around the world, I met many people, some church leaders who said we had 50, 100 pastors die. I had friends locally who passed away because of this virus, and I have friends in the US and other countries. And so the virus was definitely a serious issue. It was a pandemic. It was a legitimate pandemic. Many people were adversely affected. But the questions that arose from it is, how did it begin? Now, there was speculation in the early days that it came from a bat from what they call a wet market in Wuhan, China. Unfortunately, that theory has seemed, fortunately, that theory has seemed to fizzle out. And the pervading theory is that it would have come from a lab in China. It just happened, and some people say it's a coincidence, but it's an interesting coincidence that there was an experiment going on with the COVID, the coronavirus, in Wuhan at the time, at a lab there, and that is the capital or the starting point for the proliferation of the virus. So I think it's pretty clear, at least my assessment would be that it would have come from the lab, a lab leak in Wuhan, China. But however it came, it arrived. Now, once it arrived and once it began to circle the globe, the question was, how do we prevent it? How do we stop death? And in the process, what ended up happening is that there was a race to create a vaccine. I believe it was Donald Trump who was among those who initiated something called Operation Warp Speed to try to generate a virus, not a virus, but a vaccine in record time. And the race was on, and you had Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and others who were all trying to get a viable vaccine to the market. And a vaccine was produced. There was something called mRNA, which allowed for a new type of vaccine to be produced in record time. There was speculation that this vaccine would change the game. It would eliminate this pandemic and everybody would live happily ever after. Unfortunately, it did not deliver as promised. There was a vaccine that was promised. It was delivered, but it didn't deliver as promised. At the beginning, the speculation was that it would be the end of the pandemic. So people got the vaccine and everybody was kind of reassured that, okay, we won't die, we won't get sick, and only the unvaccinated would be a problem. Over time, that proved not to be true because persons who got the vaccine, they still got sick, they still died. There was a question about whether or not there was a lesser impact in those who got the vaccine, but even that was open for debate because some in the scientific community said it was not effective, some said it was effective. But the bottom line is people who got the vaccine still got sick, still died, and so on. The numbers in terms of efficacy is debatable, and I really don't have a conclusion There are numbers out there, but it's difficult for me to quote the numbers because the information is so speculative, in my opinion. It's hard to tell what the truth is. It's hard to tell true effectiveness. One thing that we do know is that the bar kept moving. At first, the announcement was this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Then it shifted to, well, even if you're vaccinated, you could still get sick, but you would get less sick than other people. And the bar kept moving. But at the end of the day, we realized that this promise that the vaccine would make COVID history didn't come to fruition. And now where we are today is that we are still being told that there's a division in the scientific community, medical community. Some are saying the vaccine is effective, go and get your booster. Others are saying, well, this vaccine did not deliver as promised, and some are not recommending it to be taken at all. The general public has made a decision because people have taken the vaccine at a much lesser rate than previously, and a lot of people are just unsure about the vaccine. And where we are today is somewhat strange because when I was growing up and somebody announced the vaccine, once you got the vaccine, maybe 10 years later, you get a booster. But now we have this COVID-19 vaccine where you get the vaccine and then you get up to 2 or 3, even 4 boosters in 1 year. And even after all the boosters, you still get sick, you could still die, and so on. So there's a big cloud surrounding the vaccine, and a lot of people are having questions in their mind. Some people are saying, well, the bar kept moving. You won't get sick, you won't die, and so on. And now you have persons who've been vaccinated, they still get sick, some are still hospitalized, some are still dying. One good thing about it is that at this point, the effect of the virus has diminished significantly. So people are not getting as sick, people are not dying at the rate of previous iterations of the virus. And that's a good thing. So now we are at a point where people are saying that it's no different or no more severe than the common cold or the flu. And so that means that the necessity of taking a vaccine that's under a lot of debate and speculation is out there. And then another thing about the vaccine is that unlike other vaccines, you cannot sue the pharmaceutical companies. The pharmaceutical companies have immunity. And there have been people who have had adverse effects such as paralysis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, temporary paralysis, a number of other effects. And so it's created a very cloudy situation where there's a lot of speculation about the efficacy of the virus, whether one should take the vaccine, whether one should take it at all. And so at this point, there's division in the scientific community. I have spoken to doctors who have said to me, do not take the vaccine. I have spoken to others who have said, well, it still has some effectiveness, not what was promised initially. And they have said, especially for certain at-risk groups, they still recommend taking the vaccine. Of course, my policy from the beginning has been, I give you information, I don't give you instructions. You make your decision based upon your own research. So I'm just providing the information that's out there now, updating from previous broadcasts that we've done about the vaccine, and then you make your decision. The original motive for the creation of the vaccine may have been good, but the point that we are at now is that there are a lot of clouds. When I say clouds, I'll give you an example. I saw some documents recently where they said Pfizer withheld, this is from the CDC itself, and this is not from conspiracy publications, it's from the mainstream media, and it's saying that there was information that Pfizer had, that or Moderna, Pfizer and Moderna, I can't recall exactly which one. I believe may have been both, but there was information that was withheld from the CDC that indicated that the COVID-19 booster shot wasn't any more effective than the original shot. In fact, may have been less effective. So those are some of the issues that have arisen. So people have kind of the trust in the pharmaceutical company has been diminished because the pharmaceutical companies have immunity, have made over somewhere between 300 and 500 billion dollars off of the vaccine, and yet people are having to take 3 or 4 boosters in 1 year, and at the end of the day still getting sick. So it creates a lot of consternation, speculation, creates a lot of clouds and doubt. So that is one thing. The other thing is that in the medical community, some people are saying, well, the vaccine hasn't produced negative effects. Others are saying that it has. For example, there are a number of proponents who are saying that the vaccine has created an increase in myocarditis and blood clots. And so there is speculation in that area that the vaccines have had a negative impact on the general population and that persons have had adverse effects. We know of adverse effects from persons who have had what we call paralysis, Guillain-Barré syndrome. Those were projected to be minimal, and there's still some question marks there. So there are a lot of clouds and issues related to the vaccine and its efficacy. So let me give some information that I have discovered, some of the links that are active right now on the internet. One of the links, this is from CNN, it says, FDA vaccine advisors were disappointed and angry that early data about the new COVID-19 booster shot wasn't presented for review last year. So basically, they were saying that they were disappointed and angry that information was withheld, particularly by Moderna, about the effectiveness of the booster shot. And so that creates a lot of consternation on the part of the public. The public is wondering, okay, if you withheld information about the effectiveness of the booster, can we trust you to say that this booster is effective and so on? So these are some of the kind of things that have come out. Another article, it says that the early data had many limitations, but several advisors told CNN that they were concerned about the lack of transparency. U.S. taxpayers spent $5 billion on the new booster, which has been given to more than 48.2 million people in the U.S. So basically, there's even the CDC and the U.S. advisors were upset that information was withheld. That's a very serious issue. And the lack of transparency creates doubt in the mind of the public. And it also causes people to speculate that this is about the profit motive. Let's get a new booster into the marketplace. Let's get people taking it, even though there's information that it may not be any more effective than the existing booster. So these are some of the question marks that have arisen. So another article that came out was that there was a medical expert in New York who actually highlighted the risk of pediatric COVID-19 admissions so that pediatricians, parents, and guardians could take urgent action in terms of children and young people taking the vaccine. So this New York medical official actually admitted to exaggerating the need for the COVID-19 virus. I mean, not virus, the COVID-19 vaccine. So these are just some of the issues that came up. Another issue that came up was that the U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders calls out Moderna for the proposed COVID vaccine price hike. He claimed that it only costs about $2 to produce, but it was selling for $100. And so, these were issues. And then this study also found that 1.9% of the study participants who received the original booster became infected. Among those who got the updated bivalent vaccine, the one scientists had hoped would work better, actually a higher percentage, or 3.2%, became infective. So these are some of the question marks that have come about, and it's created a lot of doubt. So what's my conclusion? The conclusion is that there was a COVID-19 emergency. People died. There were problems. There was a need to create some kind of treatment that could have helped to either prevent or diminish the impact of COVID. Of course, another issue that came up was that, persons and medical professionals who claimed to have some success, anecdotal success, with existing medications, they were discouraged. So there was no treatment available. Basically, what was recommended was that you go home, you drink fluids, you take aspirin or acetaminophen or whatever it was, and there were no treatment plans. And yet, there were some in the medical field who actually had prepared what they believed to be effective treatment plans. But persons were actually discouraged from pursuing any plan and only relying on the vaccine. So that was another issue that came about. So there was, I guess you could call it mismanagement. There were issues in terms of how the treatments were administered, how the information was administered. There seemed to be a bias towards the vaccine, even though the vaccine was experimental, and even though the efficacy was unknown. In the beginning, they were saying the efficacy was known, but over time, the bar kept moving. The science on the vaccine kept changing. So there were a lot of mistakes made. There were a lot of clouds over the whole COVID pandemic and the treatment of the pandemic and what the experts came up with. So there were all these issues. So we went through this period. There was this virus. It had negative impacts, but yet the treatment and the virus, there were issues with whether or not it was effective, and it created a lot of problems for the average person, not knowing what to do. Persons in the medical field had spoken to me, doctors in the Bahamas, doctors in the US, doctors in other parts of the world. Some were saying that, okay, the vaccine is safe and effective. Others were saying that they were seeing some very strange phenomena in their practices. One doctor said to me that, look, I have seen a massive increase in blood clots, micro blood clots. Others have said that they have seen an increase in myocarditis among young people. So this whole vaccine process, the COVID-19 pandemic, created a lot of, I guess you would call it, uncertainties. And so the point that we are at now is that we are still at the point of uncertainty. The good thing is we are certain that the potency of the virus has gone down. We are certain that less people are sick, and we are certain that for many people it's less severe. So we thank God that we are at a point where the virus, in many respects, is not much different than the flu virus, the common flu virus. So that's a good thing. We are still uncertain about the vaccine because, as I said before, normal vaccines, you get a vaccine, it lasts X amount of time, and you don't need several boosters in a year. We know that the flu shot is an annual shot, and they are saying now that the COVID has become an annual shot. But again, there's still a lot of, I guess, doubt about whether it's effective or not. And I guess we have to refer to the current research. We have to refer to whatever sources that we can get the best information from, because the withholding of information has created doubt about how effective even the current shots are. And each person has to take a look at it and make a determination on their own in terms of what's best. I recommend that you talk to your medical provider, you talk to experts that you feel comfortable with. In terms of whatever decisions I make, I have persons in the medical field, I have persons in the scientific field. I weigh the information. You know, I look at what's in the marketplace, I look at the research, I look at the data, and I make my own decision. And I would encourage everyone else to do the same thing. Research is important. Look at sources, look at all types of different sources. Don't just dismiss what some people call misinformation sources. What do I mean by that? If somebody has medical credentials and they have been reputable all their medical lives, and people are saying now dismiss what this person has to say because it's outside of what the mainstream is saying, I would say do your research, get as much information as possible from all sources, and especially sources that have credentials and have a history of work in the field of virology or whatever other field, whatever medical field it is. So do your research and then you make your decision. I made a decision very early on in the pandemic that I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm not giving anybody instructions on what avenue or what resource to consider, but I do say check the information. What I have found is that I have talked to medical and scientific practitioners who are on both sides of the divide, and I listen to both, and I make my decision based upon what I believe is the credible information. So I'd encourage everyone else to do the same. So going forward, I think we have to be diligent. As always, you have to build your immune system. You have to make sure that you are personally, your immune system is personally built up. And once your immune system is built up, then it puts you in a better position. So we have to follow the health plans. Vitamins, supplements, good food, food that's not high in sugar, high in salt, food that's not organic foods as much as possible. And so make sure that you have a health plan for yourself to build your immune system. Drinking water, getting exercise, all of those kind of things. And there are many plans available from health facilities. The best thing that I would recommend, and this is something that I've done where I've done my own research, I wrote a book called What God Wants You to Know About Food and Health. And I believe the information contained in that book will give you the best possibility of having the information that will help you to make the right choices when it comes to your health. And so that is what I recommend. But again, thank you for tuning in, and I'm thankful to have this opportunity to give a post-pandemic review. As always, my review is unbiased, impartial, and I try to provide information that I believe would be helpful. So thank you once again for listening.